This is one of the hardest questions. It feels like a punch in the gut. How can a God who is called loving, who is described as love itself, send people to a place of eternal suffering? It feels like a contradiction, a cruel paradox. If you've wrestled with this, you're not alone. Almost every person who thinks seriously about faith has to face this question. It's not a sign of weak faith to ask it. It's a sign that you're taking both God's love and the reality of hell seriously. And the typical answers we sometimes hear can feel hollow. They don't always help. They can sound like neat little formulas that try to tie up a messy, painful problem with a tidy bow. But this isn't a tidy problem. It's a deep, aching question about the nature of God, the nature of humanity, and the nature of reality itself. To really get at it, we have to pull apart some of our assumptions. We have to look at the words we're using. Words like loving, sin, and hell. We often come to this question with a whole set of pictures in our heads, many of which don't come from the Bible. They come from poems like Dante's Inferno, from paintings of demons with pitchforks, from cartoons, and from a general cultural understanding. But to understand the biblical answer, we have to start with the Bible's own idea. So let's talk about hell. What is it really? The modern picture is a fiery torture chamber, a place where God is an active tormentor inflicting pain on people for his own satisfaction. But this picture is more medieval than biblical. The Bible uses a few different words and images to describe the final state of those who reject God. One of the main ones is Gehenna. This was a real place outside Jerusalem. It was the city dump. It was a valley where trash was burned. There was constant fire, smoke, and decay. Jesus used this very real, very foul place as a metaphor. He was saying, this is what a life is like when it's thrown away. It's the scrap heap of humanity. It's a place of ruin, of finality, of being discarded as worthless. It's a powerful, disgusting image. Another major theme is darkness. The Bible describes hell as outer darkness. Think about that. God is described as light. In him, there is no darkness at all. So what is outer darkness? It's the place furthest away from the light. It is the absolute, total absence of God. And this is maybe the most crucial point in understanding hell. Hell is not the presence of God's anger. It is the absence of God's goodness. Think of everything good you've ever experienced. Love, joy, beauty, peace, laughter, a good meal, a beautiful sunset, the warmth of friendship. The Bible teaches that God is the source of all of these things. Every good and perfect gift comes from him. These things are not random occurrences. They are little flickers of God's own character shining into our world. So, what happens if you are completely, totally, and finally separated from the source of all good? You don't just lose a sense of God's presence. You lose everything. You lose goodness itself. What is left when you take away all love, all joy, all peace, all light, all relationship? All meaning. What is left is a shell, an existence of pure, raw, unfiltered self-absorption. It is an eternity of getting exactly what you thought you wanted, a life without God. And it turns out to be a horror beyond imagining. The fires of hell may not be literal flames, but the burning agony of regret, the torment of a soul consuming itself with its own selfishness, forever cut off from the one thing that could heal it. So the first big shift in thinking is this hell is less about a place God created for torture and more about the final logical destination for a soul that has rejected its own source of life. It's not so much a punishment inflicted from the outside as it is the natural, inevitable consequence of a choice. If you cut a flower from its roots, it will wither and die. It's not being punished. It is simply experiencing the consequence of being separated from its life source. Now let's look at that word send. How can a loving God send people to hell? This word makes God sound active, like a judge pointing a finger and saying, "You go there." It puts all the agency on God. But the Bible often frames it differently. Jesus himself tells a story in Luke 16 about a rich man and a poor man named Lazarus. After they died, the rich man is in a place of torment. He looks up and sees Lazarus with Abraham. And he begs Abraham to send Lazarus with a drop of water to cool his tongue. Abraham's response is telling. He doesn't say, "God sent you here and you can't leave." He says, "Between us and you a great chasm has been set in place so that those who want to go from here to you cannot, nor can anyone cross over from there to us." There's a separation, a final, fixed reality. The rich man wasn't sent there against his will. His entire life was lived in a way that built that chasm. He ignored the poor man at his gate. He lived for himself. He wanted a life where he was his own God. In death, he simply got the full reality of that life. C.S. Lewis famously wrote, "The gates of hell are locked on the inside." This is a profound way to put it. Hell is the ultimate monument to human freedom. We have a choice, a real, meaningful, terrifying choice. We can choose to move toward God, the source of light and life, or we can choose to move away from him, toward ourselves and into the darkness. Throughout our lives, God is constantly calling to us. He pursues us, he sends moments of grace, whispers to our conscience, shows us beauty in creation, puts people in our lives to love us. He is always inviting us to turn back to him, but he will not force us. Love, by its very nature, cannot be forced. If God dragged everyone into heaven, kicking and screaming against their will, would that be a loving act? Would heaven even be heaven to someone who despises its king? Imagine someone who hates classical music. They find it boring, stuffy, and painful to listen to. Would it be a reward to force them to attend an eternal symphony? No, it would be a torment. In the same way, for a person who has spent their entire life saying, "My will be done, not your will be done," the presence of a perfectly holy and loving God would be unbearable. The light would be searing. The love would feel like a judgment. The holiness would expose every dark corner of their being. For such a person, the only thing they would want is to get away. Hell is God in a final, sorrowful act of love, giving them what they have always wanted, to be left alone. He honors their choice. So maybe the question isn't, why does God send people to hell? But rather, why would anyone choose it? And that brings us to the problem of sin. We tend to think of sin as a list of bad things we do. Lying, cheating, stealing, and it is that. But it's also much deeper. The Bible describes sin as a fundamental orientation of the heart. It's a state of rebellion. It's the declaration of independence we all make from our Creator. It's the deep-seated desire to be our own gods, to run our own lives, to decide for ourselves what is right and wrong. And this rebellion has consequences. It breaks things. It breaks our relationship with God. It breaks our relationships with each other. It breaks our own souls. We see the evidence of this brokenness everywhere. It's war, hatred, greed, abuse, loneliness, despair. This is what a world looks like when human beings try to live apart from God. And sin is not just a mistake. It's a cancer. It's a force of decreation that pulls everything toward chaos and death. And here we come to the part about God's character that we often forget when we talk about his love. And God is not just loving, he is also he's holy. This means he is perfectly good, pure, and right. He cannot abide evil. He cannot simply shrug his shoulders at injustice, at cruelty, at the suffering caused by sin. If a human judge saw a violent criminal and said, "Oh, I'm a loving person, so I'll just let you go free," we wouldn't call that judge loving. We would call him corrupt. We would say he is unjust. He would be failing in his duty to protect the innocent and uphold what is right. God's love and God's justice are not two competing attributes. They are part of the same perfect character. A good and loving God must be against that which destroys his beloved creatures. He must be against sin. His opposition to evil is not a contradiction of his love, it is an expression of it. He loves us too much to be okay with the sin that is destroying us. So, we have a huge problem. We are all infected with this sin. We have all chosen our own way. The Bible says the wages of sin is death. That's the consequence. Eternal separation from the source of life. And God is perfectly just, so he can't just pretend it didn't happen. He can't just sweep it under the rug. The debt must be paid. If the story ended there, it would be a tragedy. It would be hopeless. We would all be headed for a self-chosen hell, and God, in his justice, would have to let us go. But the story doesn't end there. This is where the whole picture gets turned upside down. This is where the love of God explodes into the story in a way that is almost too good to be true. The question we started with was, how can a loving God send people to hell? But when we look at the whole story the Bible tells, we realize we've been asking the wrong question. The real mind-boggling question is this: why would a holy and just God go to such incredible lengths to keep people out of hell? Because that's what he did. God saw our predicament. He saw us, trapped in our sin, headed for separation, unable to save ourselves. His justice demanded that sin be paid for. His love desired that we be saved. How can both happen? This is the meaning of Jesus. This is the heart of the Christian faith. God did not stay distant and aloof, simply pointing out the rules. He entered into our mess. The Bible says that God himself became a human being in the person of Jesus Christ. He lived a perfect life, the only life that did not deserve death, and then he willingly went to a cross. On that cross, the greatest injustice in the history of the world happened. A perfect man was brutally executed, but in the spiritual realm, something else was happening. And God was taking the full weight of all human sin, all the rebellion, all the hatred, all the greed, all the lust, all of it, and placing it on his own son. Jesus took the punishment that we deserved. He paid the debt that we owed. He experienced the separation from God. That was our destiny. One of his last cries from the cross was, my God, why have you forsaken me?" In that moment, he was in hell. He was experiencing the outer darkness, the total separation from his Father, for us. God's justice was satisfied, the penalty for sin was paid, and his love was demonstrated in the most powerful way imaginable. He didn't just say, I love you, he showed up by taking our place, by dying our death. And this changes everything. It means that the way out of our predicament is not by trying to be a good person. It's not by trying to earn our way back to God. The way out has been provided for us as a free gift. All we have to do is accept it, to trust in what Jesus did for us, to turn away from our self-ruled life and turn toward him. So now, let's go back to the original question. A loving God doesn't stand at the edge of a cliff, pushing people into hell. A loving God stands at the edge of the cliff, with his arms bleeding, having built a bridge back to safety at an unimaginable cost to himself. And he pleads with people to cross it. He calls, he warns, he invites. He says, you are heading for destruction. I have made a way out. Please take it. If a person looks at that bridge, looks at the bleeding God who built it, and says, no thank you, I'd rather take my chances on my own, I want nothing to do with you, and then willfully walks off the cliff, who is responsible? Who made that choice? God's heart is not for anyone to perish. The Bible is very clear about this. He desires all people to be saved and to come to the knowledge of the truth. The existence of hell is not God's primary will. It is a terrible, tragic reality that exists because freedom is real and choices have consequences. The existence of the cross is God's primary will. It is the shocking, beautiful, and costly rescue mission he launched into a world that was determined to destroy itself. This doesn't make the idea of hell any less terrifying. It is, and it should be. It is a sober and awful reality, but hopefully it reframes the character of God. He is not a cosmic tyrant. He is a heartbroken father. The Bible even describes God as grieving over human sin. He weeps over the choices we make. There are still hard questions, of course. What about the person in a remote jungle who has never heard of Jesus? This is a fair and important question. The Bible suggests a couple of things. First, it says that everyone has some knowledge of God through creation itself. The beauty and order of the world point to a creator. Second, it says that God has written his law on our hearts, in our conscience. We all have an innate sense of right and wrong. People are held accountable for what they know, for the light they have been given. We can't know exactly how God will judge each individual case, but we can trust his character. The same Bible that tells us about hell also tells us that the judge of all the earth will do right. We can trust him to be perfectly fair, just, and merciful in ways we may not fully understand. The doctrine of hell is not something Christians should delight in. It's not a weapon to be used to threaten people. No, it is a tragedy. But it is also the black velvet backdrop against which the diamond of the gospel shines most brightly. Without the reality of sin and its consequences, the death of Jesus makes no sense. It becomes a strange, unnecessary bit of drama. But when we understand what we are being saved from, then we can begin to understand what we are being saved for. We are being saved from a self-inflicted eternity of nothingness. And we are being saved for an eternity of everything of love, joy, community, purpose, and relationship with the God who made us and loves us. In the end, God doesn't send anyone to hell. He ratifies a choice that has been made over a lifetime. He allows a soul that has insisted on its own independence to have it, fully and forever. The door is offered to everyone. The key is the cross. But each person must choose whether or not to walk through it. God will not force the door open. That would not be love. That would be a violation. And the one thing God will never violate is the free will of the creatures he made in his own image. He loves us that much.